Welcome to At the Feed Store podcast with me, Erica Lance, where we talk farm, feed, and everything in between. From industry insights to customer stories, we're here to serve up real conversations straight from the heart of rural America. Hello, I'm here today with Mitchell Hansen, the territory sales person from Kent Nutrition Group. And I am Erica Lance with Feeders Grain and Farm Supply. Today, we're going to talk about minerals, why those are important in your livestock operation. So let's start out with some questions to Mitchell. So what do you think overall minerals? So when we're talking about minerals, let's start with cattle, overall cattle minerals. So why do you need minerals for your livestock?
Honestly, it's a question that gets overlooked a lot. Mineral on a 10,000 foot view is probably the most vital part of livestock nutrition, specifically cattle nutrition, outside of obviously fresh water and then feed after that. Mineral plays a vital role in all aspects of the animal, from hoof quality and hoof health at the ground level, all the way up to skin quality, hair quality, just so those cattle look good and are clean coated and look right, all the way to gain and productivity. And then the major one that's become a big thing is reproductive aspects, and getting cattle bred, getting them bred back faster, getting that calving window tighter. It basically anything that you want your cow to do at the highest level, mineral is going to play a vital role in that.
So when we're talking about the minerals, there's many options when it comes to the form in which you can get it in. So obviously, there's tubs, there's loose mineral. So let's talk about the loose mineral to start with, and kind of a high level. So when we talk about that, the different options, because, you have your regular, like an AD and E is what Kent has. So your general overall mineral versus your breeder mineral versus, let's kind of talk about that and how those differ and why you would do those at the certain times in the productive life.
Yeah. So to start just on the form of the product itself, loose mineral is going to be the most concentrated version. It's going to have the highest levels of vitamin and mineral that we can shove into a product. And it's going to be the raw form, essentially. It's the best bang for your buck. It's the lowest inclusion rate on a per head per day basis. And then with that, like you said, AD&E, that would be the baseline of our framework mineral line. So every mineral product that we have on the market, AD&E is the base layer.
So if we back up there and you're talking about inclusion, so what do you mean by when you say inclusion?
So by inclusion, it would be the intake per head per day.
Okay.
So loose mineral itself, the majority of our minerals are 1/4 pound per head per day. There's a couple of them, high mag or the mag mineral specifically is a 6 ounce inclusion per head per day or intake per head per day versus some of the other products like tubs, which would be a 3/4 pound per head per day intake. And we'll kind of get into that and dive down a little deeper onto that. But as far as just loose mineral goes, any scenario that a person would have, there's more than likely a mineral line for that. So like we said, AD&E would be the baseline model. And then we have mag mineral for that spring grass that's coming real fast and it's a little washy and a little kind of just spread out in terms of nutrient value.
Right. Because especially if it grows too fast, you get a lot of those spring rains. And you're just not getting that right amount of nutrition. And also, as we know in the Midwest, we are very deficient when it comes to magnesium, selenium. So that magnesium is going to help with that absorption factor as well.
Yeah.
All right. And then when we talk about, so I interrupted you, but when we were talking about the AD&E and then we talk about mag, so we also I have a lot of guys that come into the store asking about fescue mineral. So what is the positives of feeding fescue and what's the application? Obviously, we're talking about fescue mineral because they are consuming fescue.
Yeah.
But what is in that fescue that would cause somebody to need to feed a mineral specifically around that?
So native fescue has an endophyte that's in there that it works and cuts off blood flow if you're getting too much endophyte infested fescue into that animal. So we have our fescue is along with pretty much the industry average as far as what it offers. It's higher in the level of copper that it offers, higher in the level of vitamin E that helps keep circulation and blood flow open and to fight against that endophyte that's trying to constrict blood flow and close off blood vessels, which then closes off circulation. And that's where you see endophyte toxicity, losing tails, losing feet, things like that.
It kind of reminds me almost like a founder.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. When you first see it, it'll swell up real big and then it'll necrotize and come off.
Yeah. And then when we roll, so fescue, I also have had people ask, can they use the Availafor?
Mm-hmm.
So if we talk a little bit about Availafor and why we could kind of use that as a substitute for fescue mineral and how that works and why Availafor, that overall program is important.
So our framework mineral line is pretty much broke out into two separate categories. We have our baseline, framework AD&E, mag, fescue, all the way up, any kind of deal. And then we move to our performance framework line, which is a full rate of Zinpro's Availafor product, which is an organic trace mineral, amino acid attached. It's an industry leader in terms of bioavailability, what the cow can actually process and utilize. It's the most available product. There's a bunch of reproductive benefits. And from a fescue standpoint, that bioavailability of those trace minerals actually makes it a better product to feed that's a little more in line with fescue toxic grasses.
And would you say when we talk about aminos, so we know that helps with overall absorption in general and trying to get those. And so that's why that technology is super important because it does have that in there for absorption purposes.
Yeah.
So when you talk about fescue versus Availa, and you say, yes, it has the copper and everything, could a producer use the Availa in place of the fescue if that's what they had available to them?
In certain instances, yeah. It all depends on the fescue endophyte load that you have in the region that you're in. It used to be, it was kind of the southern tier of Iowa, northern tier of Missouri had some fescue issues. That started to creep both ways as time's gone on and cattle have migrated just with cow-calf producers moving everywhere, cattle moving everywhere, bull buyers, bull producers moving all over the country. That fescue has a role to it as far as the region that it falls in. So it all depends. But I've had guys that have just fed a performance AD&E that's not a fescue labeled product, and they do fine. We have a performance fescue product, so it's our baseline framework fescue with a full rate of Availafor. So there's a bunch of different options available. I can't argue one way or another. I've had guys that are on fescue that do just fine with what they've been doing for years, but as soon as they have a train wreck, they come to you or I, and they want to fix it. We've got fescue, AD&E, performance AD&E, performance fescue.
Do you feel like at the end of the day, I mean, as long as they're getting the mineral in front of livestock, it's going to help in some matter, whether, it's the right mineral for the right time of year or for that right application. As long as they're doing that baseline mineral, that's going to help. And we've talked about this a little bit, just overall about mineral. So, there's a lot of people out there that believe that mineral isn't necessary for your livestock. And the one thing that we have to remember when we look back in history, right, that it was based on animals roaming. We don't have that anymore. Based on the way that our livestock are in pastures, we have them fenced, all of that. I mean, they're not searching for those minerals like they were because there's not an option to do that, right? There's a fence, there's a barrier there to keep them from doing that. And I think that's our biggest point with mineral, right? Because it is important to have, and it's not just going to naturally come to them.
Exactly. And the other part along with that is a lot of our native grasses and native environments that cattle may have started in before mineral became such a prevalent topic and prevalent requirement. We don't have those anymore. Guys have gone to seeding down pastures with what they know is nutrient dense forages, and they may be missing a piece here or there. And it all depends on your soil type. So I think mineral plays a bigger role more and more every year. I mean, the price of cattle these days, it's a no-brainer to feed it because you get more gain, you get more cows bred back, even if you're feeding the baseline. It's nothing changes if nothing changes.
Right.
And so if you're not feeding one now, I can promise you, guarantee that you will see a difference. If you're not feeding a mineral now, or if you're feeding a mineral now and we move up to a different one, there's always benefit to it.
Right. Exactly. And that's what I've seen with guys, when they come in and they just want something. And I say, something is better than nothing.
Exactly.
Right. Because getting some minerals in there so things can digest correctly. That's a factor, right?
Yeah.
So if they have essential vitamins in their system, then they're going to be able to digest. They're going to be able to take the nutrients in on even the forages that they're taking in. So we want to make sure we have that balance so that the reproductive life of that animal, I think that's a huge factor too. So when we think of overall minerals, that's going to help your reproduction.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure guys do not like it when they have a cow that's open.
Yeah. Nobody likes open cows.
Yeah. So this is just one more tool in the toolbox to kind of help you to make sure that you do have a productive cow that's going to make you money, essentially have a calf.
Yeah.
So when we talk about bulls and the impact of mineral on bulls, what are you seeing in the industry overall? Like, what are guys really pushing for their bulls?
I can tell you that even so, we want cows to have mineral. I think it's almost 10x more important that bulls have a very good mineral. Because if you have bulls that don't semen test, and you don't know that because they're not on a good mineral and they get kicked out, it's not just one cow that's going to be open.
Right.
You're going to have a catastrophe. That I have more people that pen bulls together in group settings outside of the breeding season that will buy a better mineral than what they're feeding their cows because they understand the reproductive benefit in that bull to keep them rolling and keep them on a good nutritional mineral plane, that they'll buy the best mineral that they can find. And their cows might be on a middle of the road solid mineral because they understand that I can have one open cow if she doesn't get enough mineral. But if I have a bad testing bull, I'm going to have 100 open cows.
Callus is key to vitality for them. And that's the whole point of why you have those. Definitely. And how do you feel when it comes to like feeding calves out? So when we're talking, there's people out there, they're not big operations, right? So some smaller guys feeding out a couple head of steers. How do you feel about the loose mineral and how they should do that for the beef essentially that they're making?
So to jump back to almost the very beginning when we talked about the different forms of mineral, small operations that are feeding 1 to 150 head of calves are more than likely going to use a protein supplement offered by a feed company. A lot of those, 99% of the time, are fortified already. So like our product, 34 Baby Beef, is a cornerstone product that it's fortified with vitamin and mineral to start with. Okay. But I still recommend having a loose mineral out there because you always have, most of the time, the smaller producers, they're going to sell their good cut of calves and they're going to have a few oddballs. Those are the ones that are going to get fed. Anywhere from a big 900-pound calf to a little 300-pound flyweight. Yep. That 300-pound flyweight's more than likely going to get kicked off the bunk, and he's not going to get what he needs from a vitamin and mineral, let alone feed perspective, if they're in a group setting. That's why I recommend having loose mineral out no matter what. They're not going to eat as much as a guy would think or a person would think on a daily basis, but having a bag out for them that when they do need something, they can go and get it.
Yeah, certainly. That's the way our operation. You kind of keep that buffet out of what they need. So they can, free choice, right? So you can get it when you need it, but we're not going to push it to you necessarily. And you can definitely tell that cows, they when they need it because they'll hit it hard.
Exactly.
And I think another factor, a lot of people get stuck on the math, right? So you got to have this much per day per minute, right? When it comes to even mineral. And I've seen that not be the case.
Yeah.
I see them maybe on average.
Yeah.
Right. But not every day that same consumption.
That is one of the biggest things that I've come to enjoy. I was not a math kid growing up, but I've come to enjoy the math of helping people work through that. Cause I'll get a phone call in the middle of April when that grass is growing fast, cows will blow through mineral. And then guys will say, oh, shit, they're eating 6-8 ounces a day. I don't know what to do. And I'm like, hey, just let it roll. They're going to get level and it's going to be fine. And then I'll get a call from the same guy the end of August. They're not touching mineral. I don't know what's going on. And I want you to, and so then you put it all together and you take the average of that 120, 180 day window.
Right.
And you say, hey, you've got 100 cows out here, 4 ounces per head per day. You should be feeding around 40 pounds.
Sure.
Or 25 pounds right in there. And then you take that over the life of it and you divide out how much they've used.
Right.
And it ends up normally 95% of the time right in there around that 1/4 pound per head per day intake. So it's honestly, it's pretty cool to work through that with guys and you see it. Mineral has hills and valleys.
Oh, yeah.
Like anything else.
Well, it's no different than, overall your growing season, right? So when we're talking about, okay, do you have green grass? Are you feeding hay? There's so many factors that play into mineral consumption.
Yep.
And you always have to keep those factors in play when thinking about, oh my goodness, are they eating enough? Are they getting enough? I think overall, myself as a producer, I just say, do they have it?
Yep.
Right? So if they have it, they can get to it, it's available, then you know that the option is there when they do need it.
Exactly.
So it's so essential to be checking that on a regular basis, because that's the last thing you want to do is run out of mineral when you start feeding them.
Definitely.
Right? So that's one thing that I'm like, I will keep it out there for them. That's fine. But oh, by golly, I better go check it, because if I run out, then we're going to have a whole nother.
Exactly.
Yeah. So let's roll into the tubs themselves. So we have loose mineral and then we have tubs that have minerals in them. So I have a lot of guys that come in, they want tubs, but there's some tubs that also call for adding a little mineral to them. Why are tubs formulated in that sort that they would need additional minerals? So
tubs are an interesting one because we're using that molasses as a carrier, and we can only put so much into that before it degrades the integrity of that tub itself. Nobody likes having soft tubs or slimy tubs. We like a good hard tub that they're going to eat 3/4 pound right in there per head per day. So we can only put so much product into that tub. So we make a balanced profile like our Phos 5 and Avela 4 tubs. It's a balanced profile that has a full rate of Avela 4, but it's not a full mineral requirement. And we also don't add salt to those for one reason or another. There's no salt added. And I think part of it is to encourage people to feed a loose mineral alongside it. That way they're getting their salt requirement. Like you said, having the buffet of a tub, a loose mineral, and a loose salt or a salt block along with it. That way, if they're short on one or another right in there, they can go to what they need. Tubs are an awesome, really efficient way to feed mineral. If you keep them out, you can keep them out for a while. It cuts down on your loose mineral use to a certain extent. So you don't have to if you can't get out and check cows near as often, or if you're an older operation that has an older age of the operator around there, they're a little easier to work with than having to go dump mineral and fight cows every 3 or 4 days.
Right. Now, my question for you that people have brought up and asked, but when it comes to the mixing, the filling of the tub itself, so how do you know that the minerals themselves are not going to be denatured based on the way that they warm the tub and then put it into the tub? Because obviously it's warm in order to get it to mix correctly. Yeah. And then putting it into the tub so it will harden effectively. So is there any kind of denaturing that happens with those, or is there some sort of technology that helps with the denaturing of
those? So when that molasses comes through, they cook out as much moisture as possible so that then it works in a way that it's warm enough that it's viscous and will set, but it suspends the mineral without degrading it at all.
Okay. Yeah, because that's always a question that's brought up. Because if you think about it, it's like cooking anything else. People just automatically, and a lot of people reference them as cooked tubs too. So when you think cooked tubs, like, oh my gosh, they're heating them up to 300 and some degrees. And, that's definitely going to have some denaturing happen that way. But based on what you're saying, they're doing it to get rid of the moisture so that it will set up as a hard mass, essentially. Okay. That's I mean, that's a huge thing for people. The tubs are super handy. I mean, I use them for my livestock.
Yeah.
So it's just another option as well for me because it's easy, especially, you know, if you have stuff in a feedlot type setting, it's a lot easier to stick a tub out there than to try to put some loose minerals
in a spot that they can all get to it.
Right.
Exactly.
That won't make a mess of it. Yeah, definitely. With that being said, you know, we're talking about salt and how salt is kind of a secondary item when it comes to tubs and how we need to look at putting that, you know, aside when we put out tubs. So we have our loose mineral, we have a tub. And then what do you think about putting salt out there for us to use as well as another option? I mean, salt's very important, right? It's kind of an overall health factor. I mean, minerals can really get down into it. Yeah. But what do you think about salt and how it affects
Salt is an interesting subject because you have your stake in the ground. I feed salt, I feed salt, I feed salt. And then you have your other camp of, well, there's salt in the mineral, so I don't need it. Right. And I have to play somewhere in the middle. I understand that salt is one of the most vital nutrients that an animal needs for growth, utilization of hydration. Basically why we need sodium. And there's more salt products on planet Earth than I had ever imagined there could be, from a tracer salt that you carry here that's got some trace minerals to a cobalt salt block, iodized salt, sulfur salt blocks. We've got options all over the board that I honestly, in a perfect scenario, from a feed perspective and a mineral perspective, I like a salt block because I think cows, when they're salt hungry, can overeat on a loose salt, and then they go off mineral. Right. So a salt block works the same as a low moisture block, that they're going to get what they need, and they're going to walk away. And I mean, obviously, like we talked, when it comes to the overall salt profile, there's so many options out there for salt. So like here at my store, I also have the rock salt. Yep. You know, I have a Redmond salt. I have a fine salt, an iodized salt. I mean, there's so many options. How do you feel? I mean, salt is salt, right? In your opinion, but do you think having the options of different types of salt can help people in their operation? Yeah. So along with that camp that we talked about, if I feed salt, there is a strong sector of each salt variation. Right. That I'm going to feed cobalt salt blocks, or I'm going to feed iodized salt, or I'm going to feed sulfur blocks. It's basic. It comes down to personal preference of what you think you need. I know that cobalt salt blocks have been a very big thing. Yeah. The last couple, I would say 2 or 3 years, if not more, guys like them. They keep eyes clean and dry. And I honestly, for as bad as a fly problem that we've had in Iowa, Southern Iowa particularly, guys have seen a lot of benefit from them. So I would say if you can find cobalt blocks, I'd roll with that. Okay. And because there is so many options out there, and there's, you know, that's the thing that people, so like a Redmond type salt, so that has other minerals in it as well. It's not, you know, processed salt essentially, because there's a whole nother process that salt goes through to be what it is. Right? Exactly. So, you know, that I think is, I mean, it's an option for people. But the question is that what's the content of salt that, say, in this particular bag here that we have on the table, how much salt is in there based on your daily value? That's a good question. I'd have to dig in a little more. I know that our salt levels are anywhere on our non-performance minerals, and a couple of our higher end performance minerals do have a higher salt content. But that comes with, it's a higher salt content because the mineral that's accompanied with that salt is so much more available to the animal. Okay. That we don't want them to just blow through it. Sure. And then pass it out the back end and not utilize it. Right. So you want to have that absorption. Exactly. So balance with the salt for absorption. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So our salt content is anywhere from 13 to 18% on a baseline level. We get up into the 19s and 20s on, like we said, some of those higher end performance minerals that we offer. But they're all formulated. Our formulations and nutrition team does a very good job of making it as close to a daily requirement. Okay. But much like mineral, goes through hills and valleys.
Right.
Where sometimes they're going to be salt hungry and they're going to want just salt. So that's why I think it's always a good option to have a salt block or a salt product out along with your mineral. That way, especially if you're feeding a higher end mineral and they get salt hungry, they'll go through 8, 10, 12 ounces just trying to meet their salt requirement. And then everybody knows salt is considerably cheaper than mineral. So if you have that option there for them, if they're salt hungry, they're going to do that. You're going to save money on the back end.
So do you see some guys where they have issues where they're blowing through so much mineral because of the aspect of not having that salt option out there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I see it all the time. And I've noticed some people like to go cold turkey and just pull them all the way off mineral and put salt out for a week. I would edge on the side of caution with that.
I think something would be your preference.
Exactly. Because you're going up and then you're going to crash and then you're going to have to bring them back up.
Okay.
So it's always a good option to just have it out there or even just accompany it. If you see them going through mineral at a high rate, throw salt out, but continue to have mineral out there too, because they will inherently go to the salt if they need it.
And when we talk about livestock overall, obviously we've been focused on cattle. And when we're just to revert back and talk about overall salt mineral for all livestock. So, when we talk goats, sheep, a lot of times people are feeding some sort of a pellet or something of that sort. So unless you have stuff on grass, a lot of times, like we talked to your baby beef that you have, it already has minerals in it. So I still think it's very important to have, whether a tub or some loose mineral out there for sheep, goats, what that looks like. But some of it, you're not going to see them necessarily go through it as fast if you're feeding them some sort of pelleted feed that has a balancer in it.
And even just, it's all, and especially on the size of the animal. So we've got a performance line for sheep and goats. It's kind of the main thing we offer. When we tested it there a couple of years ago, it was kind of a home run for us as finding a performance mineral for small ruminants. The intake rate on that is 2 ounces per head per day. So it's so low that you don't go through it near as fast. Just because that animal is smaller, their requirement is practically the same, but the concentration level is very similar to the product. Their weight and mature size is so much less than a beef cow. The intake is going to be lower on it on a daily basis. But much like you said, it goes hand in hand with feeding a pellet or a complete feed. There's already some fortification built into that they simply don't need as much because they're getting it from another avenue too.
And a lot of people already know, obviously, the reason why I talk goats versus sheep separately is because sheep cannot consume the same amount of copper as what a goat can. So it's not a one size fits all. No. So if you have goats out there and you want to feed them your sheep, the goat, no. Just because of that context of copper, right? So that's even courses. I mean, I have pretty much all of it. So even my horses have mineral out there, whether it's a tub and loose mineral and salt, because a lot of mine are forage, right? There's not a lot of pellets in there from that balancer aspect of it. And so I have options for everybody, whether it's sheep, whether it's the goat, because it's important to make sure, especially from a reproduction standpoint for me, like I want them to be productive. That's the point of why I have them. And that's just where I want people to understand that. That's why we're talking about mineral today and why it's important, because the minerals aren't just out there. Right. So they're not just going to come from the sky or come directly out of the ground for your livestock. You're going to have to essentially help. And whether it's you're doing grass-fed livestock or you're doing grain-fed. I mean, it's just an essential part of all of the livestock. I mean, I know us as humans, a lot of us take vitamins. Why do we do that? Because we know we're not going to get all the essential vitamins based on our daily intake. Our diet. So that's my biggest thing. And I appreciate you coming in today and talking about this. So it's fun to go through and have this discussion so people understand. Because that's my biggest point of doing this, is that I want people to understand And you can make your own educated decision based on the information that we provide for people.
Yeah.
So that, hey, this is why this is here. This is why the mineral exists.
Mm-hmm.
So here is the options that you have, and do it with it as you please. But we want everybody to be educated on why we think it's important, and you can make that decision on your own. Thanks for visiting at the Feed Store Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube so you never miss an episode. Follow us online and check out our full lineup of products on feedersgrain.com. See you next time.